These canyon walls carry my tune. The only one to hear my song are the coyotes and the wolves. But if I drink enough of this flask, I can hear them sing your song too.
That rocky plug that's on that north end of that, forcing you to have to go around that too, and the road is not supposed to do that. So all these other factors are to consider.
The road went back that way around. I'm pretty certain to get around that rock plug.
You had to.
You had to go on the other side, and around that area is where you see Gimlin in the early footage of the Patterson roll.
He's pulling that horse.
He's pulling the horse around at the bottom of that rock slide.
Right.
And then they go around the big plug, and he's riding. Oh no! The next scene is Roger. He's on the opposite side of the bank there, across from the end of the bat boxes area.
Right.
He's back in there among those alders and stuff, riding his horse, and there's that gorgeous wall of vine maple.
The reds.
Red vine maple. And then he comes riding up forward, and then it cuts, and then there's Gimlin up on the road. And you can tell where he's riding has got to be through the bat boxes. That log landing, flat area, right up to the Peter Burns site. And then it cuts again, and then after that it's just some hillside that for some reason Roger filmed this hillside, and then it cuts again to Bigfoot.
Right.
And all of a sudden, boom, like in the X Creatures, they show this with John Green's role of the film, that nobody knew where it was. It was lost, supposedly. But I said to Munns, why don't we find out, you could see John Green has the film in his house where Chris Packham, the host, was.
Yeah. And
he's showing it on a film roll that looks just the right size for the K100 Kodak camera. And it's looks like it was the original roll size copy of the original, like we know John Green got.
Right.
He had a full copy that was just straight, the whole reel, and then he had enlargements and details done up for another copy purpose. But, so we kind of know that that's the full roll. And eventually, Munns asked Green. I had asked Green, I said, that you're in that thing, shown having it. Do you still have it? What is it, in your closet or something?
Yeah, go look for it.
In a box or whatever? And he said, I have no idea, recollection where that is, or if I still have it, I don't know where I put it. He sounded really like he didn't think he had it. And, he did remember showing it to that guy. But then Bill Munns went and asked him, and it was found in his closet or whatever, where he kept all of his Bigfoot stuff. And that was the original film. And, luckily for us, since Bill Munns never publishes any of the films that he gets, because he's somewhat slavishly devoted to his agreement with Patricia Patterson not to break any copyright at all. So we never get to see any of the film work using the actual film with Bill Munns, except if he's seeing it on a TV show that is paid for the rights, or he's looking at still images, in his book or his online report. It's always still images, and nothing's linked up to the video itself, which is kind of sucks. the only thing we got was that weird little animation that he did.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was so useful because it showed us, like, step by step what he saw was going on in the film frames. And that's what we could never get from anybody. Nobody wanted to share an actual frame by frame copy of the film. So it totally made our work a lot harder. And finally we got an analysis that showed us what the film action really looked like in, intricate detail, studied from one frame to another, even though it was just little cartoon characters going across the screen, And his sight model that he made just from his own vision of what the film sight would have looked like from the film, you get a very limited glimpse of what Bluff Creek really is doing in that. Like that first frame where you got water, and we didn't even know what that water was doing there.
Yeah.
But that's actually the creek, we know.
Yeah, because you look at that earlier frames, you can't see as a creek heads south. You can't see it. Actually, technically that would be west. You can't see it, and all of a sudden it shows up on the far left because that's the surface area of all the gravel, and the creek is down below.
Yeah, and there's a log jam, and there's some kind of water. And, some of the film copies we had, it didn't even have that in it.
No.
And in another one, it was like one of John Green's copies had been spliced. So we had the Bigfoot on one side of the log jam, and then all of a sudden it pops over onto the other side of the log jam. So the water looked like it was a pool or something. And we were just totally confused by this crappy evidence. We couldn't find anywhere the real thing. And everyone's guarding their own damn interests or kissing the ass of some ancient person who made them promise never to tell, It's like after a while, these don't you ever speak about it, orders, they get pretty tiresome.
Yeah, they do.
And, you eventually want to say something like, I was there at Roswell in 47, and I saw the damn little gray guys, walking on the desert sand. And I saw them take them away, to the Air Force base. And, like whistleblower dudes.
Yeah.
But, all the Bigfoot people are just so culty about this crap. And, some guy like M.K. Davis manages to get a hold of the film scans that, Rick Knoll had made from John Green's copy, that John Green had made him promise, this is just for you, okay? Not for anybody else. Renee DeHinden technically owns the still frame copyright, and Patricia owns the moving picture projection images. So it was copyright. Are you violating? But MK Davis violates both, and in some ways I might say that's kind of heroic because we got to see the film better.
Yes, stabilizing.
And, everybody idolized MK for a while because he was the guy who had the cojones, but also the audacity or the gall or the skullduggery and evil, whatever you want to say, to steal the damn thing. Literally stole it and went to Yakima even and got Patricia to sit with him and smile as he was publishing her privately copyrighted thing. That's one of her only sources of income.
Yeah.
MK Davis put it online and it spread everywhere. And I'm glad it did for me because I got to see it better than was in those stupid chopped up old documentary films where they never showed the full frame and they never showed the full film.
That was a tool that we used to help identify landmarks and artifacts that we used to trying to confirm the film site location. That stabilizing helped out a lot.
Well, yeah, because you could see the pieces of the film site that were actually in the film. And, when you're looking at it, when it's not stabilized, it's just too much information blurring all together. and you're struggling as it is just to look at the creature or the subject, the man in the suit, whatever it is. And the more you do that, straining to look at the Bigfoot, the less you're going to look at anything else, like the landmarks of the film site itself, or what kind of trees those were.
Right.
You know, what the color of the things were in the background and why.
That's the debate that
These
comes
are all
on.
things we found out, like vine maples are red,
Right.
broadleaf maples are yellow, and they're green in September.
Early September.
They don't
mid-September.
turn yellow until like September. They start turning yellow.
Yeah.
The broadleafs, but the yellow color doesn't come into the vine maples until basically October.
I mean the red color in the vine maples.
Well, the yellow color starts to come, but the red color definitely is rare. You can see a few of them have turned, but
Yeah.
very rarely ever that early. Like, you know, some people want to say the film was shot in September. That's just baloney.
Well, just to add to that, because it's about how much daylight is happening and what's the temperature. When it gets cold, it speeds up the process. And people don't know that the leaves attach to the stem, and when the season changes, this cork substance builds up and it stops allowing the sugars one direction. So it burns out till you have reds left. And that's...
Yeah, and it's just a different time of year that they change, and the years aren't that different from each other. Like I asked Al Hodgson, have you ever seen the vine maples turn red before October? And he said no. And this is a guy who's lived here since the 30s?
Yeah, a long time. And we're talking about the people who lived here a while ago. Their whole lives were based on details. They paid attention to details.
Well, they had to.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're not these frou-frous at the colleges and living in the cities. These are people who could basically do everything that they had to do to survive. Like, to live out here, if your bulldozer or your truck or whatever broke, you had to know how to fix it.
Right.
And sometimes you didn't even get to fix it, like, in a professional shop. You know, you had to jury rig things or create tools, use baling wire or whatever. And, like, there were ways around the problem, and especially helped if you understood how a diesel engine ran, or, whatever else you had to do out here. Build a house,
Right.
build a deck, build a restraining wall, build a bridge, plow a road, fight a fire. I mean, these are the kind of things people have always had to do out here to live in the rural areas, right?
Yeah, so you would say basically they were open to details. There's another thing that M.K. Davis did.
Well, you didn't want bad details. You had to have the good details.
No, if you want to surviave.
Bad details will get you lost in the woods, like M.K. Davis,
Yeah, no GPS back then,
What were you going to say?
Well, one of the contributions also in our research that M.K. had done, he sent a photograph. He lightened the background of the hillside.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
That was actually helpful. At first, we thought it was a hill in the background. We thought it was a hill, a slope in the background. But we found out that there was a berm, but it was relatively flat behind it. And he was able to decipher that by...
Yeah, well, it's still pretty steep. But
8 feet.
That area back behind the big tree is less so.
Yeah.
Than the stuff. Like, one of the things I saw that he lightened up.
Yeah.
He got some quality images from Peter Byrne, I think.
It's a berm.
But he was able to lighten up the background so that you could see that there's depth in the woods, not just like this wall of trees like you see in the film. And those early frames are hard enough to see anything in them. So to see back in there and see what those trees looked like behind there, it started giving us the idea that part, when we were looking at the trees to the west more, was probably the first part of the film that's shot over that way.
That's a steep hillside.
Yeah, and then it moves over this way. So it's not like Patterson's just standing there filming more or less like with his feet all in one position and maybe just rotating his arms. He's actually moving his whole position and his body and feet with it to get, these various views. So everything in the film moves and changes perspective, and so that's yet another illusion that we had to erase out. And that square box illusion that the Chris Murphy diorama had given us, that all these illusions of perspective, it's quite a distance back, but if you look, it looks like Patty's walking right next to all this stuff, right? And the big tree in the back, if Patty's walking right next to all this stuff, then she must be huge, because that big tree is big. Look at it. So, Patty looks even bigger because of that weird illusion of the trees.
Right. And like a lot of stuff we looked at, it didn't have, I never did find an exact measurement from the where the stumps are to the big tree in the background. We measured all that, so we know exactly how far away it is now, but at the time we needed that information, and it wasn't there. We had to
well, they didn't measure everything like we did. They measured some of it.
Yeah.
And they also were focused more on other things, like back then when Green and DeHinden measured the site, they had those alder trees still there.
Right.
And so we ignored the alder trees because they weren't theirs. We just measured the other things.
Stumps.
And the back stumps and the trees in the back, we wanted to know how those fit in too. But those were largely, I don't think that those weren't included in the DeHinden measurements.
No.
The last thing he has is a stump that's down there at the bottom of the big tree.
Yeah, there's one off to the left it's squished against the bottom of the hill, which we couldn't use for the triangulation. I think we ended up using the tall stump or the leaning stump, and then we used the smiley stump, and we were able to form a triangle.
Jamie's calculations.
Yeah, he used those for references.
Yeah, it's trigonometry.
That's math.
Which I never finished.
They paid attention to that.
I took the first part of trigonometry and said, that's enough math. Don't need any more.
Yeah, I'd like to tell this little story too, because as we went along, Steven's a visionary. So as we went along, he was visualizing Patty pathways. So every time we're doing the research at it, we'd have to take time out for the Patty pathway story. And that went on every section. And I remember towards I guess I would say in the end of 2010, we were over by the bowling alley, and Steven is given his Patty Pathway story, and we're looking at it. And then after the Patty Pathway story, we climbed up the berm, the 9 feet up. We went climbing through the bushes, and then we made our way over towards a big debris pile on our left side. And we're standing there, which is basically overlooking DeHinden's X. And it all started making sense to me based on topography and the bowling alley, which is that long skinny spot that we climbed up. And then it started clicking. So now I become Steven, and now I'm doing the same narration story.
I've seen you do it
so much with Steven.
It's almost like we've worked out a standard narrative. Like some of the words that I said are from you.
Yeah.
Some of the words you say are from me. Some of them go back to Ian, and it's all kind of collaged together. It's almost like I don't even have to go anywhere. I see Robert in some video, and he's like, he said the right words. like it's almost like we could just have a hologram.
Right.
The Bluff Creek generic project guy, who's there doing the thing.
Same words.
Now, but I don't know, how much can you really explain? A lot of the newcomers aren't going to realize why there were controversies over all these ridiculous little details. Like, even after we prove it mathematically, there's still
doubters.
M.K. Davis saying, those debutantes don't know anything. I'm such a big old-timer hero,
He took the Japanese film crew to his
the
site.
Nerve of that guy.
And we took the Japanese film crew, a different film, to our site. But they didn't film us walking across the ground.
There were 2 different Japanese TV shows.
Yeah.
Although to me they looked like they could have been related in the company. Like their styles were very similar.
Yeah. We had 5 guys, all chain smokers, and the whole time they smoked. They took us right up to the site. We took them to the site. They did their filming thing. They even did a video on it, but it's all in Japanese. I have no idea what they're saying.
The white guy looks very stupid. Believe in Bigfoot. Ha ha
Hey, did you ever get that translated to see what they actually were saying?
No. I mean, I'm. You can kind of tell by the way they cut to like images and stuff. It's like, this is where Bigfoot walk. He's big like Godzilla. He walked right here, and they show like a cartoon of Bigfoot, big, goofy Bigfoot, and then they cut to you and me talking, and it's like, you can only imagine they must have said something funny because like it's obviously like a comedy, paranormal comedy show. A lot of their shows are like that. They're weird. Like, this woman is a psychic, and she's like shown there with like the moon and mists and and yet it breaks to these areas where people are laughing and stuff. So it's like you can tell whether it's serious or not. But I don't know. It's like probably a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Like they want to mix the fun and the serious together
That's good.
in a way that maybe Western people wouldn't. But Japanese are very strange in their television tastes. If you ever try to watch the Japanese TV, it's just bizarre, and it's even more bizarre if you don't know the language at all. You pick out like a few words and you're like, I don't know what the heck is going on here. But they get all obsessed about the most bizarre, weird things.
They love monsters. Obviously.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Godzilla, Minyasha, Mothra. Yeah, they're the monsters big time. One of the Japanese show I used to watch many years ago is when it's almost like our the shows of today, where you have to run this obstacle course and we cheer for the crashes. Where they wear these helmets and these shirts,
or like those Jackass shows.
Yeah, and they get totally smeared. The big thing would swing and knock them off, or they'd fall down this thing, and it was funny, but it was very similar to the show we have today.
Well, you have to wonder why anyone in Japan bothered ever to build a city, because eventually there's going to be some frickin' giant monster come out and stomp all over it, and kick all the buildings over.
Well, I love watching that growing up. That was always cool. Yeah. So the film site thing, there's a lot of stories behind us trying to figure it out, or doing the research and arguing with people, having people tell us, "Oh, you guys are wasting your time. It's been washed away or lost." Yeah, because even Perez wasn't so sure until we sent him the map that we drew compared with the Dehinden 171. And
he eventually got convinced.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't ever think we'd get Bigfooter of the Year award, because Perez just never seemed to pay any attention to us. Like, he had this weird attitude. He was, like, at one time the big expert on the film.
Yeah.
But he didn't seem very interested in what we were doing, actually on the ground studying the real thing. And so, when he was seen walking around there by Ian, he was in that lower gulch area on the lower sandbar,
right?
Not on the upper one. And when we see him in 2003 on Mysterious Encounters,
there he is.
He's there just up from the lower gulch on that gravel bar that looks like a rounded turtle back.
He's being interviewed there.
And he's there, and this is the spot. This is where they filmed the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is the film site. One word, not two.
Yeah.
Film site. Yeah, but we love Daniel.
Yes.
I mean, his book is one of the major sources of our information.
We use it as a resource.
Better than the Murphy books.
He had Dehinden's X on that map that had in his book.
Well, like, Dehinden could have lied to Daniel and maybe play a practical joke on Daniel, right?
Right, he could have done that.
Because, like, we know at some times that Daniel did aggravate Renee.
No.
Although Daniel wants to make it look like they were like soul brothers, I think probably there were times when Renee was sort of shining him on a little, or who is this young whippersnapper, but he made some funny joke about Daniel. He said, like, what is the best way to spread a secret all across the earth? And you could like telephone someone, or put it on television or whatever.
Or tell a Daniel.
And he said, "Tell a Perez, tell a Perez, and everyone will know tomorrow." And sure enough, it proved to be true.
Yeah.
When that stuff from David Paulides' police record came up, like I had that anonymous source, and he told me,
Right.
just look into the newspapers. It's like Deep Throat or whatever. He had the whole thing going on, anonymous something or other in his email. And he obviously was from like that same area, San Jose. He had obviously worked in law enforcement, and he obviously knew David Paulides from the community. And he said that he'd even been involved in like his kids had been involved in the same sporting league as Paulides' kids, and Paulides was a coach, like hockey coach or whatever. Although I think he said something about soccer too.
Huh.
But I don't know. Anyway, like the whole deal was that Paulides said he had been 20-year detective on the force, but in fact he was not a detective, and he didn't work the full 20 years.
17.
He was
like
16 years in like various roles. Starting out, like he was like they had a special team, kind of like a vice squad type of deal, going after crime and drugs or whatever. And he had some problems with that, where a suspect beat him up. Apparently, a black guy, beat him up, got away, and Paulides was fairly badly beaten, feel sorry for him, but I mean, he's doing a noble job trying to be a policeman.
Yes.
But apparently there was retribution that occurred with Paulides' teammates banding together, and they had David Paulides in the car, who was injured. So Paulides didn't go in, but they knew where the suspect was, and they went to this apartment building where he lived or was staying. They went in there and beat the crap out of him, and this is largely black African American community kind of place. So they beat him up basically for Paulides. What was he even doing there? He was injured off duty, staying in the car apparently. This is in a newspaper article, and it's not slander that I'm saying here. I'm trying to be as accurate as I can to what was actually in the article. And so he was given a desk job after that, where he became like a court liaison officer, not out doing enforcement or patrol or whatever. And apparently the desk job didn't suit him very well. He got bored or something, because he was later accused for collecting celebrity memorabilia and signatures while on the job, using police department stationery and representing it to famous people in letters that he would write, where he said he was doing a program for the youth, and it involved look what you can do with your life. You can be like these people, famous, influential, strong, popular, whatever. Like, there's some weird names like Lionel Richie or something. I don't know what his taste in autographs was coming from, but that stuff was somehow in the article that I read too. But so he was caught, and this was considered to be fraud, misdemeanor kind of thing, but enough for him to be fired. He was misrepresenting this purpose, because there was no program like that. He wasn't in charge of doing youth group or public presentations involving like celebrities, and he said it was for a wall display. They were gonna put them all in so the kids could see this great inspirational thing, but instead he was just collecting them.
So he was just collecting for himself?
Basically so, apparently. What else would he do with them? I mean, was he selling them? I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe he was so poor after that, that article came out that alleged racist police brutality on a black guy, by a white policeman. But, I mean, I don't know if all the guys were white who were on that group.
I don't know.
And, the first person to get beaten up was Polites. But, I guess there was so much outcry about the goon squad quality of them going after the guy. And, not just arresting him for the original crime he supposedly did, or the subsequent crime of, beating up a police officer and escaping. They instead went and punished him on their own, like street justice kind of thing.
Which isn't their job.
And I think they just left him there, too,
Oh,
beaten
it's not
up. Like, that just sounds like the Old West kind of justice, a lynch mob-y kind of thing. So, I mean, obviously this did not look good, and they basically fired, not fired, they demoted him. And he didn't really get fired until the second thing happened, and then he was let go, and a few years later, he started applying for or requesting his benefits because he had some work-related injuries that were from his on-duty times. I mean, maybe from that incident where he was beaten up by the suspect, but maybe something else. Apparently there were some serious things that he had medical bills for, and he wanted his pension back, his benefits with medical and everything. And so he went to court and won that case. So he could then say, when he was reinstated, that he had worked for the police department for 20 years. But in fact, it was 16 and then 4 years, and then he was reinstated, apparently. As, well, I guess it's kind of like, if you're in the military and you get a dishonorable discharge versus like an honorable discharge where you can still be considered for like, military benefits or maybe even enlisting again in the future or whatever it is. So, I mean, he went around claiming in the Bigfoot community that he was this hotshot detective, and he applied all that skill to the hunt for Bigfoot. And he had worked for 20 years doing this. But in fact, it played out just like that in the Bigfoot community. He talked a big talk. He exaggerated everything and lied when he had to make an impression on people and sell more books, and so unfortunately, despite the good work that he did on a lot of the aspects in the Hoopa Project and Tribal Bigfoot,
those 2 books,
he included a lot of crap in there too, and a lot of things he put in there specifically because he didn't want anybody thinking Bigfoot is an ape. He wanted everyone thinking Bigfoot is human. And so he manipulated the data of these native stories to make it seem like all Hoopa people believe that Bigfoot is a tribe of human beings living in the hills. When in fact, a lot of the Hoopa people think that Bigfoot, quote unquote, it's not even called Bigfoot in their culture. It's a spiritual entity that guards the forest. And it changes shape to you, how you see it. It could appear to you and give you a lesson of some kind. This is just like, a spirit being in a vision quest. And in the native culture, that's very different. It's just as real as like objects like these things and animals, but they're living things that are not biological. They're entities, spiritual beings. I mean, how does that translate to a Western culture person, most likely raised on Christianity or maybe Judaism, or like you've got in the Bible, you've got angels, and you look around, maybe you find something like talking serpents or Nephilim, giant type creature beings who were just men, big humans. I mean, that's not Bigfoot or whatever.
No.
But, so like you could exaggerate that and turn it into Bigfoot or whatever, like it was just what the white people do to the native stories that relate to these kinds of beings that are part of their culture, but they're not necessarily animals in the normal sense. Just like in a native culture, a coyote isn't necessarily just some dog, or a crow or a raven or a wolf or a bear. These are animals of power. They're totem animals that have a higher spirit inhabiting them somehow. Just like, trees can have powerful spirit too, or locations in the landscape, or, place on a river or a creek. Power spots or magic, spiritually significant somehow. These are things that don't really relate very much to white man's culture, although I'm sure if you go back far enough, you could find that in European culture. There's just no real record of it.
Yeah.
It's been washed away by history. I mean, even Beowulf, that old English story, was written after the Christian contact had occurred. And so the author who wrote it down from the original sources put in some Christian elements to it that are notable. If you're a literary scholar, you could piece them out, and there are books about this. So it's not even that ancient text is truly fully pagan,
We still have the Green Man too in Europe.
Yeah, we have these old elements, but I mean, we don't know that much about the ancient cultures because they were suppressed and erased, and conquered by like the Romans and then whatnot, on it went. So these things like witchcraft and Wicca and Green Man, Wild Man, Wood Woes, Druids, Stonehenge, the Celts, whatever. It's a lot of it is just lost in history, and what we have of it in now is modern reimaginings of it. Just like King Arthur is basically fiction, although there could have been some of those things in history that were told and retold, and then eventually they're thematic elements that found their way into the Arthurian legends that were written down later. They're not necessarily even the same thing anymore.
Inspired by stories.
Yeah.
You think the Bigfoot is similar to that?
Yeah, I think so. It does come from the Native Americans here in this country, but I mean, much like the rougarou, which is, I mean, if you know French, loup-garou, loup, L-O-U-P, is wolf, and garou is a weird word that basically means like, I don't know, man-like monster thing. I don't know, garou, I wasn't able to find that in the dictionary I used. But loup-garou means like a werewolf.
Yeah, my French.
And that's stuff that came from Europe. Yeah. And it's present there at the north of the Great Lakes area, where it's still known today. And it went down the Mississippi
to Louisiana,
to your guys' part of the country.
Yeah,
you get all those Cajuns and stuff down there.
Cajuns, Creoles,
swamp guys and whatnots who believe that there's werewolves out and rougarous.
Yeah,
which is kind of like some people think it's just another form of Bigfoot, but because like how would they understand if they saw a wild ape-like creature? How would they even understand it? Well, it looked like a big wolf,
Right.
or like they sometimes say, it looks like a big bear. But I mean, how did it all get started? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd ask the same thing about Dracula and the vampires.
Sucking blood or whatever.
It's all just weirdness, and a lot of it's superstition. A lot of it probably had to do with mysterious rituals and mystical rites and vision quests and stuff, just like you have in the Native American culture, and that culture, it seems to be very ancient because, I mean, it's very similar in a lot of ways to the primal culture of Tibet, the shamanistic culture that existed there pre-Buddhism. Mm-hmm. We don't really know that much about it, but some parts of it survived, and they're definitely more Tibetan than Buddhist per se, because Buddhism was brought to Tibet later from southern sources, Southeast Asia and India. Buddha being an Indian himself, so it took a while till we got to the place where there's like a Dalai Lama. But even then, if you saw the Tibetan dances, their dances are like enacting these creature beings that look a hell of a lot like the dances of the Native Americans, and the Sasquatch dances or the Kachina dances, or like we have here, the deer skin jump dances and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Very similar cultural things, and that whole line runs right, through the Northwest, circles down in through Mongolia into the Tibetan upper steppes of Central Asia, on this side of the Himalayas, and of course, Tibetan culture eventually ended up in the heart of the Himalayas.
Yeah.
The lost cities now occupied by the Chinese.
So I'm going to be back to North America. So I'm out in the woods. I have an encounter. Something I can't explain. I tell my friends. I watch the Finding Bigfoot shows.
Uh-huh.
I watch Expedition
You
Bigfoot.
do?
And next thing you know, its popularity is growing. Do you think Bigfoot is more popular now than it was, let's say, I don't know, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because, well, culture is different now.
Yeah.
Or you could say the media is different now. Like when we were exposed to Bigfoot, our generation, we were getting it from people a little bit older than us, like, Peter Byrne and Green and DeHinden and Robert Morgan.
Short guy, bald guy.
Yes, these dudes who were making those documentaries with the film companies. Like Roger Patterson was one of the first who really got that going with. He was making connections in Hollywood, but mostly being rejected, so he ended up working with Ron Olson and the ANE, American National Enterprises Film Company. And so they were producing these kind of movies that could be shown on TV or in drive-ins or in the four-wall style traveling presentations, like Roger and Diatley basically did with their film in '67. That later they toured for a year and a half or whatever throughout the country. So they ran up against, the collapse of the Minnesota Iceman, which was exposed as a hoax, basically. And of course, Bigfooters still resist this.
Yeah.
That it was fake. But it was pretty much revealed to be fake. And so the interest in Bigfoot collapsed for a while. But, it started to come back again in the 70s. Like, the 70s are known as this weird period of high strangeness. But, I think a lot of it has to do with the beginning of the television dominance. Like, you had a sort of expansion of weird topics onto TV, and you started having a wider exposure of them. More and more and more people had television sets and color TV sets, even better. So you could really get a lot of viewers with a documentary about Bigfoot and other mysterious monsters. And so like that, and shows like In Search Of.
Oh yeah.
These are things being produced in the early to mid 70s to the late 70s. Just the golden era of Bigfoot documentaries. And Roger Patterson's was from 8? He had worked on it in 67, 68. I don't know when they first started showing it now. We have to ask Dustin.
Yeah.
But I've forgotten now what the first showing date was. But I think Jeff Meldrum was that one.
That's right. That's inspired him to take the journey.
Yeah, as a little kid.
Yeah.
And I think Roger, like, he didn't just spark Jeff Meldrum. I think he sparked a lot of people. And he, after all, wrote the first proper book just about Bigfoot. Ivan Sanderson's was a global hairy hominids of all kinds sort of book.
Yeah. And
Betty Allen's book was just a pamphlet. So, 1966, Roger Patterson, he has this cornball book and a goofy adventure drama that he's working on. But eventually it morphs into the BBC wanting to do a documentary, and putting that together with Roger's Bigfoot film from Bluff Creek and his Yakima footage, what there was of it. Apparently a lot of it wasn't even used, and no one seems to have seen it. Although, Roger is known to have had a bunch of other films. Munns has some of them. And of course, he's only shown little frames out of... God, when is it ever going to be made public?
Yeah, you like to get your hands on some of that just to see it.
To finish the story, so Patterson is there, he is in the late 60s, and it just takes a while to snowball, and it combines with the advancement of television, leading up into the era of, cable and VHS tapes and stuff, where it just spread like everywhere. Suddenly everyone was getting way more and more and more and more information feed. Whereas, like, you can remember when you were a little kid, I'm sure, that if there was nothing on TV, there's nothing on.
Right, all 3 stations.
Yeah, and you would, like, look forward all week or all month for a show to come on.
Right. Like,
all of a sudden you got these shows that are on over and over again, and there are multiple channels, and it's spreading and spreading, and, that same thing has happened with our era of Bigfoot revival, since the BFRO started.
Yeah. 95,
you started having more and more and more attention given to this weird old topic. Like, I remember when in 99, when I got back into it, I was like, still encountering a lot of people thinking, like, is that thing still around, Do they still have Bigfoot? Thought it went extinct, or wasn't that just all a hoax? And we all know that since 1960s. But, no, there's a huge culture of people that still are into this thing. So, like, I ran into it in 2003. I was just amazed. And amazed even more when they started coming in my store after 2005. All of a sudden, I was meeting everybody off the road. And I'd look out in the parking lot, and there'd be these Jeeps with crap hanging off them. All these weird gadgets and blasting speakers,
sound blasts,
and like little camera things. Like, what is that? And the Squatch Mobile with like guys like Jerry Hine, and just like this whole lifestyle squatching thing, is way bigger than I thought. Like, Bobo wasn't just some single guy. I mean, he was one of the most dedicated in the 80s or whatever, predating Moneymaker, I must say, and yet there are a lot of other people like Bobo out there, and I was just kind of like in awe, like these people seem so dedicated, and I was just like kind of lightheartedly curious, kind of jokingly so in a way, like I got to be almost a full-on believer, and then it started all falling apart. Like I started seeing the dark side of the Bigfoot world, to kind of hook up to something we were talking about earlier. So I started becoming more and more of a skeptical thinker, because I had to. I'd see something so crazy or ludicrous that I had to say something. Like, what do you say to somebody who believes this, that, or the other crazy thing?
Yeah.
And you have to have a methodology to counter them, especially the guys who are just delusional. But, I mean, also the ones who are fiction writers or big tall tale tellers, P.T. Barnum, con man, snake oil salesman, and the whole thing. You start realizing that a lot of the whole thing about Bigfoot is that there's been these factions squabbling since the very start. And all this talk and all this debate and all this grandstanding and hero worshipping, and yet the evidence is just trampled under feet, and it's all so bad. Like, you get something like the Skookum cast, and the guys who made it are so egotistically attached to their own sense of heroism and skillful outdoorsmanship that they can't even admit the obvious truth that it's an elk, and they can't even go out there and get objective analysis done by more than their small group of Bigfoot sympathizers. They brought in bright guys, what's that guy Fish, what was his name, Leroy?
Leroy, yeah.
The other guy, the other biologist, whose name I'm forgetting. But, Meldrum and Green. And then, then you had all these other guys who were involved, like Rick Knoll, Randalls, whatever. It's like, you can't take your evidence to a Bigfooter for peer review. I mean, you could do an initial peer review among the believers. They say, well, that looks good, but I think you're wrong here. There are a lot of honest, sort of critical thinking believers in Bigfoot who are capable people who can sort out the evidence and stuff. But still, for an evidence to stand, it has to be validated, verified, questioned, analyzed, and maybe falsified by outside anybody. Anybody who can challenge it should have the right to do so if you want it to be validly accepted by science. It cannot be if you just let Bigfoot people look at it. You just like the Patterson film. Any skeptic who wants to get a decent copy of it, it's practically impossible. Well, we don't want them looking at it, right? And part of the thing Renee wanted to do was to keep the information to himself. He didn't want the film out there. He didn't want a frame-by-frame, high-resolution scan done. There should be a full-on digital, highest resolution possible scan from several of the best quality copies. But no, we don't have that. We have some crappy junk put out there by thinker-thunker or M.K. Davis or whatever other fly-by-night hack who wants to get attention on the internet, you know.
And then there's this DNA Ketchum.
Yeah.
I mean, you think that's... I mean, I don't think that's good stuff, but there was
it's terrible.
a DNA thing that came out, and then it wasn't any peer review for that, and a few other odds.
Well, there was peer review done. It was submitted to various scientific journals, and it was rejected, or one in particular did. Some peer review, initial review, and it was sent back to her, rejected with recommendations. So then she later said, see, here's some peer review. We passed peer review. And then she published this. Her and Scott Carpenter published this. And you can read the stuff, at least when I saw it, when I read it, it said in there, we can, basically we cannot publish until you make these kind of revisions to your paper. And they were all enumerated, like 5 of them. And it's basically what that's saying is, we are interested in your paper, but you have to fix these problems. So that is a failure of passing peer review. And so she thinks somehow, or wants you or somebody to think that she passed peer review. Mm-hmm. And now she's being suppressed by the evil government or whatever. The evil science world, who just can't handle the brilliance of what she supposedly discovered.
So you're saying it wasn't Nephilim? It wasn't angel DNA?
Yeah, angels fucking human women, creating Nephilim, who then mated with some primal, prototypical human, then created some bizarre new thing. Only, how many thousand, what did she say? 13,000 years ago, or 15,000 years ago. I don't even know, when was the flood of Noah supposed to happen? It's like this stuff, I don't know, weren't they all wiped out by the flood? Mm. But anyway, it happened in the 15,000 years ago, according to her, and it was this weird mixture. A fallen angel is not even a biological being. And then she said something like it was out of this world, almost like hinting at like spiritual or aliens. And she said other weird things, like it was closer to a chicken than an ape, or that it somehow was related to lemurs. So I mean, at least she's getting close to like higher primates there.
I'm moving up.
But I mean, we kind of tend to think Bigfoot is an ape or primate. Humans are apes. We're very closely related to the chimpanzees, who are more closely related to us than they are to the gorillas or the orangutans. So we are apes among the family of great apes or whatever. They're called hominids now. We're called hominins. The Homo sapiens, Homo whatever, Neanderthalensis, Floresiensis. If Denisovans are finally given Homo credibility, I don't know if they've named them that yet, but Homo Denisoviensis.
I don't know. It's all Latin to me.
Denisova is like a region, a cave too.
Yeah, in Russia, the corner of Russia.
Cave, the Denisovan. So they come from Denisova, like the Floresiensis hobbits come from Flores, the island.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there we have it. Like, what were we talking about?
we were just talking about the evolution of how whether more people believe in now
the Ketchum
than
thing
before, and then we talked about some DNA stuff. I threw that on top of that just because you were talking about some other evidence.
Well, first off, a lot of people, way more people are into it now than before.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they're all into it in different ways. There used to be a more unified culture we all, like, by the millions watched In Search of Bigfoot
Yep.
or whatever. So anyway, along comes Melba Ketchum, and yeah, she's brought into the thing by David Paulides, and they get on Coast to Coast AM, and so they're immediately marketing themselves on the biggest paranormal media outlet, radio anyway, and obviously angling for TV and other access. They had a business plan written up where they described this unveiling of Bigfoot as a tribe of people, and they were human feral people. They had this whole plan, like, written up, make documentaries, show how the tribes function and where they came from with DNA sources and stuff. And so they eventually developed this with Melba, who was previously involved with Tom Biscardi, and we all know what a hoaxer he is. She tested that, what was it, a toenail of unknown origin, something like that, to try and find out. You could see it in the Biscardi documentary where he waves the paper around and he's saying, like, so you're saying it's basically human, right? and you can see on the paper it says inconclusive. So that, like, I guess it's sort of like human, sort of like primate, but inconclusive, corrupt DNA or whatever, degraded, contaminated. So Ketchum just came along and did this ridiculous study for 5 years or whatever, from 2008, publishing finally in 2013, and publishing it in her own online journal, which anyone could set up in 5 minutes online using one of those free website builders, and then you just call it whatever. Oh, I'm a scientific journal now with peer review, even, and like, who did your peer review, Melba? Come on. But I mean, she posted that old peer review of it when it was rejected, with recommendations to justify herself. Yeah,
I know Wally Hersham was a big funding source for her for a lot of the research. He was supporting it. Yeah,
$500,000.
Yep.
Dollars.
I don't think he was too impressed by the outcome of what he invested into it.
Yeah, the word that Wally said was fraud.
Yeah, that's a good definition.
I heard that from
a few people.
The discussion that they had over there with the Olympic project. Yeah. And people we know, like Bobo and Bart and others, were involved in that, so we've known the truth, or the probable truth, of this thing since almost fairly shortly after it started.
Right,
like 2009 or whatever.
Yeah.
But went on and on and on and on and on. Like Wally and didn't want it to ruin the possibility for there of being a positive result. So there were a lot of people like Randall's and, well, probably all of you guys. I don't know, not so much me, but like, that's where I started getting really skeptical, is this Ketchum business. And like, a lot of you guys didn't want it to be revealed. I don't know about you, Robert. I didn't really talk about it that back then, but like, didn't want it revealed because it could damage the research. And even if Ketchum was a flawed analyst, it was the opportunity to collect that many specimens, like some 120 or more specimens from across the continent and Canada, to see if Bigfoot could be proven with DNA. And apparently he can't be, or all 120 something were not Bigfoot, or were corrupted or contaminated, or like, we eventually found out that she was working with a bear sample from Justin Smeja
from the Sierras,
and it was black bear, clearly, And then another piece of something or other from a drain pipe where Bigfoot had apparently cracked it open and left some hair and stuff behind. Saliva, trying to chew and get into this drain pipe because there was some animal that had crawled up into it to escape and got stuck up in there. So you can imagine Bigfoot was trying to crack into this PVC pipe and left behind a bunch of... I mean, it sounds really stupid, you know? Could it maybe have been a bear or a deer, a dog or something doing that? Coyotes, maybe? I don't know. I mean, I've seen dogs chew off the front of a car, and bears will do shit like that too.
Oh, yeah. Yep, they have.
Bears will rip the thing to pieces. But, you know, and the other one was that was found out to be a dog, actually, that chewed the pipe.
Which makes sense.
A dog. Not even a wolf or coyote. It was a dog. And the other one was apparently from the Kentucky situation.
Was it the pancake thing?
Where they had made a plate
pancakes.
with glass or whatever on the edges of it. So when the little Bigfoot came up to eat his pancakes, they'd get some blood. And that was... She claimed that all of these were Bigfoot, even though they're different. The Kentucky one was human, ordinary human, not primordial ape-like human. No, it's just ordinary modern Homo sapiens, and that's that. You know, that's that, and they're not the same thing as a dog or a bear.
Right.
So obviously Ketchum was grossly incompetent, or else completely fraudulent. One of the two, or both at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, but definitely not a qualified geneticist or a scientist even. She was a 4-year graduate of Texas something or other university with a vocational level veterinary degree, so she could function as a veterinary doctor without having this long process of becoming a full-on real scientist, and almost like a medical doctor for humans. You know, no, they had, like, you could get through this thing really quickly, and it would allow you to go out and, like, care for all those thousands and millions of farm animals that Texas has. You know, they're horses and cows and everything else. They all need a vet. So we can't have all our vets having to go to school for 20 years, or 12 years or whatever. I mean, I have more schooling, and you do too, than Melba Ketchum. But somehow she got involved in this genetics thing where, you know, you set up like a lab, fake lab, basically a storefront, and then you take the samples in, you send them to a company or a whatever laboratory that will process them and sequence them and tell you basically what they are. And then she must have developed some skills in telling the difference between a horse and a cow. And, you know, there's different ways of telling the breeds of dog or whatever other animal. That's often what she was doing, was how do you tell if your dog is a lab mix or a shepherd mix or a pit bull, this, that, or the other, whatever. And I guess, you know, it's important in horses and stuff too.
Yeah.
There are a lot of high class breeders who want to know these things.
Well, last thing I have for you, so I don't want to take too much more of your time.
No, it's getting dark out here in this in this kiwi grove.
Yeah, it's kind of nice actually. So the last thing for you is about 10, 11 years ago, we confirmed the film site. And now it's 10 years goes by,
10
right?
10 years now.
It's been 2 years. It's crazy. And now, do you feel like...
No wonder you look older.
Yeah, I think we're not alone here.
Jeez, I do too, you know. It's like, what the hell?
So 10 years go by, and now there's a bunch of new people doing research, right? People out there are just getting involved in it. And you pretty much started a on the internet. You started basically. You had blogs for a long time that you've been doing blogs, which were pretty cool to follow. But the last thing, started back up again. I want to make sure I call right. Coalition for Critical Thinking in Bigfoot Research.
Yeah,
that's the new thing that's on Facebook. And when did you start that? And
that is also about 10 years ago.
Oh, really? About 10 years?
It's coming up in November, I think, is when I first formed it.
And how many members?
And I put the thing together and conceptualized it, and then Nadia was my first compatriot in that. Mm-hmm. And she and I put it together more as it formed as a group. And, it was mostly my thing, but she was really involved until we had too many personal conflicts to go on together. But it got going really strong. People were really heavily into Facebook back then. Mm-hmm. And that's where it is. It's on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's facebook.com/groups/smart Bigfoot, all one word. Or just search for the name. But just keep in mind there's two, because one is a fake site called the same name but 2.0 that was made by trolls. Like basically butthurt. We have a lot of butthurt, angry former members.
The ones you kick off?
Well, the ones who are jerks, and the ones who can't get along, or the ones who come on there just to harass the admins. I don't want to run a group where some jerk wants to come and bug me every day. After some point I'm just going to say, to hell with it. You're out of here. You're gone. You're a troll. And we get rid of those. But usually they flounce off on their own. They get really mad. And, usually it's because you criticize some friend of theirs. Like, it used to be the Melba people would come after us every day after day after day. And we were basically the number one site of Melba Ketchum criticism. We were the ones generating news that got turned into blog posts by Bigfoot Evidence and Robert Lindsay. Although Robert Lindsay published a lot of weird ass Bigfoot gossip. He's like seemingly spending the whole day on the phone and talking with people's secret, deep throat or whatever revelations. But we knew a guy named Over the Line Smokey Blog who was the best, and we later found out who he was in person. Although we aren't probably not supposed to say his name here. We met this man, and we got to know the author of that blog, which no one seems to remember, but it was the best, just devastating dismantling of Ketchum almost every day, with something new to chuckle about or to just be disgusted by. And so, this fueled a huge raging interest in Bigfoot on Facebook. And it mixed together, a lot of it was the anticipation of the Ketchum study from that period of time on. And, this is right when Finding Bigfoot was coming on the air. And, blogs like Bigfoot Evidence were raking in the dough. I even got paid a few dollars for my blog. It was weird. I got an Amazon gift certificate a couple times for $6.98 or whatever.
Well,
it's like, whoa, I'm getting rich off this Bigfoot thing, man. Yeah, I got a Google check today for $12.96.
Wow.
I don't get any of that anymore.
No.
Of course. No, none of those pipe dreams paid off for people Like, I mean, except for the viral marketing clickbait liars. You know, people like Rick Dyer made some money, and then Moneymaker made some money, and some of them never monetized, but a lot of these people, they went right off after YouTube. And once you get like millions of hits on something, you started to make real money. And like since then, that's like been the goal, get to be some million hit YouTuber, or get to be at least get some attention. You're some lonely person, and eventually you get recognized, or maybe even get a girlfriend or something.
There you go.
Like
Twofer.
You go to a conference and everyone comes up to you and says, "I remember you from that YouTube chat we had." Well, yeah, it's weird. Like, girls will come up to you at conferences. It took me... I arrived in Yakima. I walked up to the steps. I said hello to 2 different people. And then I walked through the door, and there was some young lady there saying, "I was just telling people... like, we saw you in that movie." I said, "I'd do him." Like, you would? Wow, I just walked in the front door. Oh my God. This is insane.
And I remember, at least, she's actually pretty good looking.
Oh, she still is. But, yeah, I mean, she's cool. But, so, like, you can see how this crazy Bigfoot thing could go to someone's head.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to prevent that from happening. And that's a lot of what the coalition group does, is we don't have any secret cows. So, even though also some of them might even be friends of ours. Like, I don't consider the Olympic Project to be my enemy.
No.
Or Paul Graves, or the Finding Bigfoot show, or whatever it is. But, I mean, if there's something really stupid or ludicrous or funny, especially funny shit, we will go after that, So, like, when Moneymaker came up with all these classic lines, like, cows are people food. I mean, we just Bigfoot knows cows are people food.
Yeah.
Or, Bigfoot has a nose like a dog. It's black and wet. Because of that Erickson Project footage where it turned out it was a Wookiee mask. Like Star Wars mask. Perfect match. Black nose like a dog. Because George Lucas claimed that he didn't base Wookiees on... Chewbacca on Bigfoot. He based it on his dog, who has this shaggy coat of fur and a cute little black nose. He probably went a lot, I don't know, but like, yeah, that's what we do in the coalition. And we, basically, as I became more skeptical and I tolerated less and less bullshit from the Bigfooter community, we've attracted more hardcore skeptical people, deniers, and agnostics. Like, I'm pretty much an agnostic in my approach. I like to consider the weird things before I reject them.
Yeah.
I want to reject all weird things because I think the universe is very weird.
Indeed.
And anybody who's ever tried LSD knows that. I'm just saying that right here. But, no, like, yeah, drop 1 drop of this stuff in your brain, and you, Mr. Monkey, are in cosmic space. So if that can be true in your experience, then what about all these other things?
Right. So, I'm just going to finish up by saying this, that the coalition, for what I see...
Before I start talking about psychedelic drugs.
the coalition, following up on that on Facebook might be worth your time. It's a lot, it's pretty entertaining, and there's a lot of players that have some good insight, and they actually ponder the evidence, and they break down some of the evidence too, which is nice. Well, Stephen is absolutely right. It's getting dark around here. And it's been a long talk. We'll probably break this into 2 segments. But I appreciate you talking to me. I know you got a lot of knowledge and information. And this is the first time I actually got to get you on the podcast because you're too busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. And I appreciate you doing this for us, for the Bluff Creek Project. Even though you are a member of the Bluff Creek Project.
Dude, we are all the Bluff Creek Project. People listening can also be part of it too. Like, we're not a cult. You know, I mean, I'm the founder, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But the other guy who founded it is not even here anymore. He's over in Virginia. God knows what he's up to.
That'd be Ian.
But, you know, you can join too and just come along and hopefully bring something to contribute. Like, you know, when Rowdy joined, he had very great bag of tricks that he brought to the thing. When Robert joined, he brought his talents and commitment and never-ending energy to doing everything the right way and measuring things and graphing it all out on amazing maps and charts. And
Thanks.
yeah, well, of course. You know, like, it's not just me or Ian just because we were there first. It's all of us. And, you know, Rowdy brought his talent and Jamie brought his. And now, I mean, it's like we got Tate, we got
Dustin.
all these other people. Dustin is like, he's done more historical studies than I have now. That guy's strangely committed for someone who has no belief in Bigfoot whatsoever. But yeah, he's got access to all those news archives, which I never really bothered much with myself.
No,
but
too busy for that.
But I'm glad he's doing it because, I mean, his book's going to be a great read when it comes out.
So will ours when it
And
comes
I
out.
hope ours, you know, yours, the one you
That's
did.
still ours.
Well, your book that is based on our
Adventure.
videos and our adventures and discussions. And it's probably a good thing that you don't have all of the raw video in there.
72 times.
Well, like, how much of that raw
10
video
hours.
got on the cutting room floor?
Most of it.
Like, a lot of this, it was like the 80 some videos on YouTube is just a tip of the iceberg.
No, it was 72.
Well, okay, but there
The
were
Bluff
others
Creek
that
Project.
followed.
Yeah. Oh, be on top of those too. Yeah. Well, cool.
Yeah, so Bluff Creek Project now, it's even more, it's just a different thing. It's like field research with trail cameras and historical preservation of the film site.
Yeah.
And basically we curate Bluff Creek for the masses who
Yeah.
kind of want to come here without making it into a tourist trap of any kind. We try to make sure people know how to get there, what the facts are. You know, don't listen to M.K. Davis or whatever. You know, listen to credible sources like us who have been verified by other credible sources like Bill Munns or whomever.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can join up and come along. Look into Bluff Creek Project online. You'll see us. We're on YouTube and blog and other places, Facebook even.
All right. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. On that note, we're going to call it a night, and
Yeah.
thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
Come buy a book at my bookstore.
Before it burns down.
I know. It was like 100 feet away. It could have burned. I would have been free.
No,
Free
wasn't
of
meant
all
to
those
happen.
books.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
We'll do it again sometime.
Maybe not.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
This canyon wall carry my tune, the only one to hear my song. All the coyotes and the wolves, but if I drink